Welcome back to my studio where I've been going crazy for the past 5 days, hiding in this tiny room, holding and protecting what may very well be the last roll of toilet paper in the house. But, enough with the toilet paper. Let's talk about saggy linings. Okay. So what do I mean by a saggy bag lining? Well, it's pretty simple. You put together your nice little bag, something as simple as a tote with just like maybe a magnetic opening, if that. And your lining looks really baggy and loose on the inside. And the main cause for this is you have too much of your wrong side of the exterior fabric available on the inside. And it's kind of combined with the fact that your lining is probably the exact same size and pattern pieces as what you would have for your exterior. So take, for example, how I've cut these samples out. So we're going to make an example of this eventually when I'm done talking. So you have the exterior and the lining pieces, and they're basically cut from the exact same pattern piece. So it's kind of like taking mixing bowls and trying to stack two of the same size together. It's not really going to work. The next size down mixing bowl that's got to go into the main one in order for them to fit nicely has to be ever so slightly smaller. That's where the solution comes into play here. So what we're going to do is we're going to first sew together the exterior, and I'm going to show you how you can reduce the exterior portion to leave room for lining. That'll also help with the problem. It's not the whole solution. After we're done with the exterior, we're going to take the lining and we're going to assemble it, but we're going to assemble it with a slightly different seam allowance so that it will fit correctly. Again, I will go into detail on all of that through this video, so feel free to stick around, or I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. All right, let's get sewing the exterior. So for this demonstration, I'm actually just going to do a very simple box corner bag, very small, just as a demonstration piece. I'm not actually working with a legit pattern today. So I'm going to be sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Most of the bag patterns that you'll find will be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And so I'm going to follow that just for the demonstration. Ideally, anything, regardless of like what pattern, the techniques that I'm going to go over in this video don't really matter to the pattern itself. They're not pattern specific. These are just techniques. So we're just going to sew up this tiny little box. And you can pretend this is whatever pattern suits your needs. By the way, I love this thread zapper. No, I'm not sponsored. I just really like it. And now we're going to take this back over to the cutting table, and I'm going to show you what you can do to help reduce the bulk. Okay, so like I said, not pattern specific. Pretend this is a messenger bag or a zippered pouch that you're trying to assemble, regardless of what the opening is. So like for this one, it's going to be just a basic tote. What you want to do is you want to trim down your exterior as much as you can. So usually with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut half of it away, leaving a 1/4 inch around. Now, just as a caveat, sometimes people like to leave a little extra at the bottom. If you want to do that, the best way you can reduce the bulk here is to press this down. Just for brevity's sake, I am actually going to cut all the way around and reduce the bulk. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to leave as much room as possible for the lining. Now I am going to clip my corner here, only because I'm slightly a perfectionist. And then continue to trim away. Making sure you leave tons of room for your lining. Now, if you are not, again, if you're not a fan of trimming away, you can just press these, but I would say if you can, then try to tack them down so they're held open, because sometimes, machine feet, depending on, which side it ends up under or on top of the machine foot, will just grab this and kind of fold it over. So, and you don't want to have, your lining be wibbly wobbly against wherever the seam is going to land. But that's the technique that I use just to kind of shave down the exterior. And again, if you had like a zipper down here, you would do the exact same trimming exercise for you know, on this end for your exterior before you start doing like final assembly for like a zipper pouch. Okay, so now we're gonna take our lining, and what we're gonna do is we're going to take a marking utensil. I am just going to use a ballpoint pen. I don't always recommend this, but I do it mostly for like the wrong sides. So regardless again of opening type. Now the type of opening we have here is going to be just wide open tote style. You're going to want to go down however far your seam allowance is times 2. So we had a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and so we're going to go down 1 inch on either side, and this is the top of the bag. So that's the top. You're going to stitch your regular seam allowance in that top inch. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to taper out and do closer to a 3/4 of an inch. I'm doing this for demonstration purposes only. You don't have to mark everything down like this. But what this will do is it'll make sure that the top portion can be bagged with your exterior and fit correctly. And then the rest of the lining is going to be snug to the bag, because it will have room and it won't wrinkle up or bag up trying to fit in an available space that it was made to fit exactly, because the pattern pieces are the same size. So same thing on the other side. You will taper out lightly to a 3/4 of an inch. See how this creates this nice little shape here? So you're tapering inward to make room. All right, so we're going to take this to the machine and execute on this. Okay, starting at the top at a 1/2 inch away, we're going to stitch normally, stitch down, back stitch, and stitch down until you reach that marker. And what you're going to do from that marker is, again, you don't want to pivot and start going out. You just want to gently glide into that. It doesn't have to be exact. It's just a guideline. Gently glide yourself into doing that wider seam allowance, like so. And I'm actually going to go and stitch down like that, and then we'll do the bottom separate. It's like, wait a second, I need to demonstrate this correctly. Okay. Besides, you have to leave the bottom open. All right, and then same thing down here. 1/2 inch away, back stitch, stitch down a 1/2 inch away. Now at our marker, that's when we're going to start to taper inward. Which you'll be like, hey, doesn't this effectively make a smaller bag? Why, yes. Yes, it does. However, it's just the lining portion, and it's only the smallest amount. So it's not really going to affect you too much in the end. But what it will do is create a nice, crisp lining. All right, so let's take this back over. Okay, now back at the cutting table. Same thing as with the exterior, only I don't want you to touch the bottom of the bag. I always like to leave the natural seam allowance down here, but I'll show you what I do in general. All right, so we're going to trim this down. Just like this. Do clip your corners. And now what I do with the opening, you see how I did leave a slight opening here. I taper it like that and only leave the hole as the portion that has the full seam allowance remaining. So again, taper it and then continue to trim. Trim the corner and trim up the side. So now the exterior, which I have flipped right side out, and the interior fabrics have both been trimmed down, so you don't have to worry about excess bulk at least coming from your seam allowances. So you're going to take the exterior that's been flipped right side out, and you're going to bag your lining. So shove that inside. I know terminology is so nice in bag making. You're going to shove it in there real good. All right, and get your clips or pens. And just as you normally would when making the bag, and I suggest splitting open your seam here so that they are laying nicely flat at the top. Go ahead and clip that down. Do that to the other side. So lay that flat if it'll cooperate. It's not cooperating. This is why I don't like to cut my fingernails. And clip it in place. And then go around and just clip that down, clip it real good. Now this is a super small example, so I don't have to clip it all over, but if you feel better about yourself, you can put clips every ½ inch. Now, I don't like to skip steps in my videos as much as I can, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to stitch the opening shut, just as I would like a full bag. So we're going to just start the stitch, back stitch, and go. And again, like I tend to lean heavily on using my industrial machine. Nothing I'm teaching you in this video is industrial specific, and if it were, I would probably put that in the title. But this, if you're curious, this is my industrial Juki DU1181N. It's got a little compound walking foot. It's adorbs. And I'm kind of in love with it. We're getting married next spring. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going around the opening here. Just like that. And when we come up to the end, we're gonna go ahead and close that up. All right, so and that's just your basic bag assembly right there. Not particular to this kind of instruction, however. So now let's go back to the cutting table. All right, now you've got your assembly. So this is the world's smallest tote bag. If it's going to become an American Girl doll bag, I'm not kidding. And I like to trim the top portion as well. You'll note that I have like this pattern I like to follow is I do like to trim my seams down. The only seams I don't like to trim are the ones that are near an opening like that, where I'm going to turn. I would like to have as much space to work with as possible. A ½ inch I feel like is not enough for me to kind of sew shut by hand. And the other thing is like on straps. Straps or strap connectors, I will not cut into those. Ooh, no. That zippers, I like to keep those intact. But for something as simple as this kind of little tote, not a big deal. Now, once you've trimmed everything away, you can go ahead and flip this right side out. Ta-da! Yay! You're a winner! Okay, so, all right, so flip everything out. All right, thing about point turning, by the way, I love these guys, but don't go in with the point first. On the rounded end, it's actually kind of shaved toward the end, and it's a lot gentler. And so I push that in there, because if you go in with the point, you're gonna cut right through. So just a thing, like I start out going in with that, and if it's still just not looking right, then I'll go in, I'll gently brush with it. Never jab, just gently brush up along the side. There we go. But yeah, don't jab. Jabby bad. Okay, so, and then we're gonna fold this down. Actually, we're not gonna fold it down. We're gonna take this and we're gonna go and we're gonna stitch it shut real quick, and then we're gonna fold it down. I thought it'd be good to just record this part, even though it's not part of the actual topic of the tutorial, but I tend to like fold this down. And you can hand stitch this if you want. A lot of people do prefer to do that. I just stitch like right along the edge, as close as I can get to it, and stitch that bad boy down, because my philosophy has always been, if somebody's looking at the bottom of the bag, you did something wrong with the exterior. So with that in mind, I tend to just save myself a little bit of trouble and time and do that by hand. I mean, machine. I mean, I've been stuck in my house for 5 days. Don't sue me for emotional damage. Cool, so now we have everything sewn up and ready to flip. Okay, so you're gonna take your lining and smoosh it, that is a technical term, smoosh it down into your exterior. Like so. And we will go ahead and top stitch it. You can't get a good feel for what the bag is going to be like until you've top stitched it. It's, you know, a lot of people just don't understand the point of the top stitching. It's not to make it look pretty, it's to keep the lining from rolling to the outside. It will naturally try to push its way out, you know, like a really bad zit. So you got to kind of tack that bad boy down. Get it in there. You can already see how nice and crisp that lining is. The only point of contention, of course, is at the bottom, because I didn't box the corners. I just kind of let them lay flat, and so what I've got is like these the corners are kind of you know, smooshed together at the very, very bottom, but you can already see how nice and tight that lining is adhering to the exterior. So it's very crisp and professional looking if you do it this way. Okay, so let's go top stitch it. Oh, one thing I meant to mention before you come over here, I use a flatbed. A lot of people may use domestics with a free arm, so I have to kind of roll my bags out so that the lining's on the outside when I do top stitching because of the flatbed feature. So if you see that I've done that and you're like, what the heck just happened? That's what it was. So I had to just flip it. Now, one top stitching trick I like to tell people is to start at one of the side seams, and I top stitch a 1/4 inch away. And the reason I start at one of the seams is so I can kind of hide the back stitching and it doesn't appear visibly on the front or the back of the bag at any point. Well, it's just a nice way to hide your back stitching. I'm trying very hard not to be lazy about this. No, it's a tutorial. I have to be super professional. So professional. Yes. Yes, I've been doing this for way too long. You should see my live streams. It's sick. All right, so we're gonna come around, pull that thread out of the way so it's not all up in the other thread's business. And now hide that back stitch right there in that seam. And we're gonna clip all of this with this zappy thread thing. I'm still not used to it. I'm scared to death of it, to be honest. But flip it right side out, and we're going to take this over to the cutting table so you can get a better view of it. Waka waka waka. All right, here we go. Finished product, the world's smallest tote bag without any straps, but it demonstrates the techniques. Decrease the amount of bulk that's in your seams, both with your exterior and your lining. Also, take in the seam allowance about 1/4 inch further than you would normally do as the patterns guide you with the lining, and that's how you get a snug lining. Now, it won't be 100% perfect. A lot of this depends on the kinds of interfacing that you use. Now, with my exterior here, I used Thermolam fleece interfacing, and with the lining, I used Shapeflex 101. So, like, those two things combined make for a very crisp and tight, professional looking bag. It's crazy, isn't it? Anywho, so that's how you make a not so saggy lining. If only that worked for the rest of us, right, ladies? All right, so I hope that tutorial helped you and gave you some good ideas as to how you can make your linings look less saggy, baggy, and nasty and wrinkly with those steps to reduce the bulk in your seams, as well as getting the tighter lining. So please feel free to like or subscribe, tell your friends, put it out there on the social medias. Whatever. Feel free to leave comments below as well for any ideas you have for future videos where I might be able to teach you something new and awesome. I also stream on Twitch on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much and have a great day.